This is a public service announcement about the necessity to back up your files to protect them from data corruption or loss. One of the worst feelings you can experience is losing something you've worked hard on and doubt you could recreate. That is why I am paranoid about ensuring my files are securely backed up. Before we get started, this video has a companion instructional guide. The link is in the description. With over 30 years in information technology, the one thing I have learned is that you will eventually experience data corruption or data loss. No matter how many contingencies you plan for, Murphy's Law will find a new and often exciting way to put your data at risk. Therefore, you should always follow Schofield's second law of computing and have at least 3 copies of your files. The first copy is a working copy on your computer. The second copy is to an external media device, whether that's an external attached USB drive or a NAS drive. A second drive or thumb drive on your computer does not count. The third copy should exist somewhere outside your home or office, like a portable hard drive stored somewhere else, in cloud storage like OneDrive, Google Drive, or other options. The backup and recovery process works best when files are in a consistent location on the source and destination storage medium. The local drive is the first place to start. Windows has a set of My Documents folders that are created on the C drive by default. I install a thumb drive or SD card with BitLocker turned on for security and move those folders onto it. This serves 2 purposes. The first is it reduces the number of read-write cycles you put on your computer boot drive, extending its life. The second is you can easily remove all your personal files from a computer and take them to another computer. I've had laptops get destroyed or stolen while traveling for business. By carrying the removable media on my person, I can get a replacement computer at my destination and immediately go to work without the need to wait for a lengthy file recovery process. I organize my stories by where they are in the writing process. They start in the Idea Stories folder until I have completed a first draft. The Story folder with everything in it then moves to the Edit Stories folder, where I revise it until I decide it was only a practice story anyway, and move it to Shelf Stories, or if I feel it's worthy of sharing with others, I'll move it to the Published Stories folder. Inside each story folder are subfolders to hold cover and illustration artwork, reference materials if I needed to do research for the story, the many drafts of the story, and lastly, the final version of the story and all documents related to publishing and marketing the story. External local storage can be as simple as another thumb drive, a portable USB drive, a NAS drive, or other network drive. Most modern network and Wi-Fi routers have a USB port that you can plug a thumb drive in and share to all devices that connect to the network. Although my primary network storage is a NAS drive, I use the thumb drive in my router instead of moving a thumb drive between computers when I'm trying to move files back. Because I have multiple computers, the second folder is the name of the computer the files are being backed up from. Inside that folder is a replica of the folder structure on that computer. For offsite storage, like cloud service where I might be backing up for everyone in the house, I might substitute the username for the computer's name. Now that we've set up a consistent folder structure to store all our file copies in, the next step is to automate the backup process. If you're unfamiliar with data backup, 2 terms you should know are source and destination. Source is the folders and files you want to back up. Destination is where the folders and files are copied to. Next, even with calendar reminders, if I'm busy or tired, I'll procrastinate and then I forget to back up my files. By automating the process, as long as the PC is powered on and it's not sleeping, the backups will always happen. One of the first decisions to make is whether we want to make copies of our files or mirrors of them. What's the difference? A copy is like a photograph. It doesn't change over time. If something happens to the original, you can clone the copy and get the file back. However, it will be missing all the changes and additions made since the backup. With a long enough gap in time, this can feel almost as bad as losing the original file completely. A mirror copy eliminates a loss of changes, but the downside is the mirror copy is susceptible to whatever corrupted or deleted the source file. For the highest degree of protection, a file should be both mirrored and copied. To automate backups in Windows, we need to use 3 features of Windows that are decades old. The first is Robocopy, a command line only backup utility with features on par with commercial applications. Because Robocopy doesn't have a graphical interface, we need a place to hold all the commands, so that Windows can run rather than us running them manually. This is the purpose of batch file. You write the same commands you would use on the command line into these special text files. You can then manually run the batch files, but since we want to automate everything, we use the third feature, Task Scheduler. Think of Task Scheduler like a calendar or to-do app for Windows. A basic Robocopy command tells it what files and folders you want to copy and where you want to copy them to. That's your source and your destination. Since we will be copying folders and all their contents, files and wildcard characters will not be a concern. The options tell Robocopy how we want the files to be copied, how to handle various situations like duplicates and empty folders. We will cover options next. Here's a condensed version of the batch file I run every hour to back up my laptop files to an external USB hard drive. Using the remark feature of batch files, that tells Windows to ignore the line. I include the name of the file and when it was last modified. The next line adds a line to backup log file text every time the batch file runs for troubleshooting purposes. This line is a reminder that when you delete a file in the source folder, it needs to be manually deleted in the destination folder. We want this behavior because we want the destination to retain a copy of every draft version of our stories. The next two lines copy everything in the Pictures and Documents folder on the D drive to a folder on the F drive called A_backups, followed by the name of the laptop, then a folder for the source drive letter, in this case, the D drive. Finally, we have a folder with the same name as the source folder. Batch files in the command line interpreter predate Microsoft Windows and interpret blank spaces as a separator between commands or command options. The double quotes tell the batch file to treat the spaces in the path or file name like a character instead. /E tells Robocopy to copy a folder even when it is empty. /XA:/SH tells Robocopy to not copy files owned by Windows. So those are system files, which are often hidden files. R5 and W15 tell Robocopy if it fails to work to do a backup, try again in 15 seconds, and then continue to try and finally give up after 5 attempts. /MT tells Robocopy to copy up to 8 files at a time rather than 1 file at a time. This makes the backup complete much faster. The XJ tells Robocopy when it sees a shortcut, do not follow the shortcut and copy what's in the folder the shortcut points to. The next line creates a mirror of the download folder. I don't need to keep a backup copy of everything I download. I just want to avoid having to download a large install file again if my D drive stops working. The rest of the batch file lines are notes to myself about Robocopy. There are plenty of good resources that show how to set up a task in Task Scheduler, so I'll just provide those in the instruction guide. But I did want to provide an example of what an automated backup looks like once it's been scheduled in Task Scheduler. So the task goes under a folder called My Task, and you'll see I have my 2 morning and evening backup job to back up to my NAS, and then the main one is this backup to the external USB drive that starts at 6 in the morning and then is triggered every hour. Each task has, so there's the general information like its name, when it should run. Triggers are what causes it to go off. Actions are when it triggers, what happens, and in this case it runs that batch file. Any conditions about power network that would prevent it from running. Settings, same thing, will alter how the job is done. We needed to make changes. Like the trigger. So here we're going to see, the task repeats every hour for 15 hours. Same thing with the actions. If we wanted to, we'd change the name of the batch file. But one thing that is convenient is if you need to create multiple of these, once you've got it set up once, you can do an export, and it'll save it as an XML file. And then there is an import task function, and you can bring it in, give it a new name, make whatever changes you need, so that way you don't have to repeat the task multiple times. Because I'm paranoid about backups, I back up my NAS drives. This backup drive is kept somewhere else in the event my house is burglarized or burns down when I am away. I'm not a fan of Microsoft's OneDrive, so instead I use the Google Drive for Desktop app. The installation instructions are straightforward, and I recommend using a separate Google account just for backups so you don't use up the free space on your primary Google account. While Google Drive does add itself as another drive on your PC, you have to open Drive in a web browser to access the backup files under the Computers folder. Note, you have to use the drop-down menus to actually see your files because the default is to only show folders. So you'll back up some files, you'll go and open up Computers, in this case my laptop, and you're like, where are my files? So you have to change one of these drop-downs. The files on Google Drive are mirrored, so remember, when you delete the source file, it will also be deleted in Google Drive, with the caveat that the way Google Drive works is it actually moves deleted files to trash and holds on to them for 30 days. So in reality, you can recover accidentally deleted files. A downside of storing files in the cloud is companies like Google and Microsoft may decide to use your files, using them for training data. An account on mega.nz is fully secure. If you lose your password, even they cannot open your folders or give you a temporary password. This is one of the very few sites I trust to store legal and financial documents. The worst time to find out your backup solution isn't backing up files or that you are unable to recover the files is after you've lost some important files. Set a monthly calendar reminder to spend 5 to 10 minutes testing the backup scripts, checking the backup log files for any recurring issues. Then practice recovering a file so when the inevitable happens, you can recover what you lost without stress, which can lead to mistakes, potentially making the situation worse. One way to make the recovery process easier is to stop backing up files that you don't need to be protected and deleting files in the destination you no longer need. All storage media that allows you to read, write, and delete files repeatedly eventually wears out. Rather than wait for it to fail, replace it. Replacing your primary storage media every 5 years ensures that it can easily be moved to a new computer when something happens to your old computer. You can continue to use the storage media you replace by adding it into your backup storage pool and retiring the oldest storage media in the storage pool. So if you think of storage media like an automobile, your local storage is a 2020 model. Your local backup is a 2015 model, and your offsite is a 2010. Next year, you would upgrade your local storage to a 2025 model, then use the 2020 as your local storage, and move the 2015 model to offsite storage. And then you would dispose of the 2010 model. Don't forget to look in the video description for a link to the associated how-to guide.